Got a few things that we're working on. Sorry for the delay, but lots of new stuff is coming soon. Hope you guys are enjoying your summer. Today, I wanted to do a movie breakdown. Haven't done one in a while, and this movie is very bizarre. Not too many people have heard of it because it's a French film, but it's a really surreal, dark fantasy movie with a bunch of esoteric symbolism and references to multiple real-world conspiracies. I thought it would be cool to go over and point out all the weird stuff in the movie. So if you haven't seen it, keep in mind there will be spoilers, but it is a long movie, so I don't think it's that bad if you want to see the breakdown and then go watch it for yourself after. The movie we're diving into today is called The City of Lost Children from 1995. It's a pretty wild ride, and we're gonna unpack all the strange, hidden meanings and symbols packed into this fever dream of a film. Once you see what's beneath the surface, you'll never look at this movie the same way again. With that, get some popcorn, sit back, and let's get started. The movie starts off with a kid's bedroom, all decked out for Christmas, but something's off. There's not just one Santa, but a whole bunch of them start creeping in. It actually starts to get pretty terrifying. This poor kid is watching in horror as these Santas start taking all his stuff, and then to add to the weirdness, there's this albino reindeer that decides now's the great time to take a dump. It's basically some type of surreal Christmas nightmare. Suddenly, we get to a new scene. A guy's waking up, screaming his head off, with some kind of freaky device strapped onto his head. But he's not alone. There are 4 identical twins who start screaming right along with them. So they're in some kind of lab, and then it only gets weirder from here. They all stop screaming at once and gather around this contraption. There's a little kid hooked up to it, clutching a teddy bear for dear life. And then it says that some mad genius named Crank is stealing this kid's dreams. This is pretty trippy. We see a brain, just a brain, trying to talk some sense into the scientist. It's asking how is this madness going to end? But instead of answering, the scientist grabs the kid's teddy bear and starts beating the crap out of it. The camera pans out and we see this lab is perched above the ocean in some crazy surreal setting. It seems to be some type of oil rig. The teddy bear falls out the window, sinking into the depths below. It's a pretty blatant symbol, but we'll get into what it all means later. Next thing we know, we're in this dark, dystopian looking town. There are a couple of kids messing around with the slingshot by the docks, and the whole place has this gloomy, oppressive vibe. We see one of those strength tester games, like the ones where you hit the lever with the hammer. At the very top, near the bell, it says, The City of Lost Children. So I guess that's the name of the city? Turns out there's some kind of circus in town. We hear an announcer hyping up the crowd for the world's strongest man. But that's not all. In the same shot, we're shown this weird cult or secret society handing out pamphlets. They're spouting some nonsense about penetrating the corridors of the shadows to become one of the chosen ones. I wonder what they're referencing. And then just to hammer home the whole secret society angle, there's an Eye of Providence symbol behind them, obviously referencing Freemasons. These guys are actually asking people to pluck out their eyes to join them and build a better world. Nothing says utopia like a bunch of self-mutilated cultists. While all this is going down, we see a couple of kids trying to pickpocket the crowd. They seem to be street urchins, and they're targeting this little one who's collecting money for the strongman. Turns out this kid's just another orphan in this messed up city. The announcer tries to stop the kids from stealing, but out of nowhere, some dude pops up and stabs him in the back. Then the guy just bolts after that, leaving everyone in shock. Our strongman, who's been chained up this whole time, breaks free, and he's worried about the announcer, but it's too late. As the crowd gathers around the poor stabbed guy, we get a glimpse of something shady going down in the shadows. There's this group of people lurking around, and one of them only has one eye. The other two are wearing sunglasses, just like those cult weirdos that we saw earlier handing out the pamphlets. So, it's not that hard to figure out that these guys probably had something to do with the murder. It's already going pretty hard with the secret society stuff. But here's where it gets even creepier. As this mysterious group takes off, we see a bunch of flyers in the background. They're saying stuff like, "Enough disappearances, where are our children?" and "Missing person notice, high reward." So it's pretty clear this town's got a serious problem with kids vanishing. It seems that it has something to do with this one-eyed cult. Next thing we know, we're at this caravan. The stabbed announcer is laid up in the bed, and that orphan kid from before is just chilling, having a bite to eat. Suddenly, an apple and a string bumps against the window. They're literally fishing for kids. The strong man's not gonna have any of it, so he grabs the apple and shuts the door. This cult is trying to steal the child, and they're not gonna give up that easy. One of them, with the one-eye device, shoots the door open, and they seem to have this device that gives them this night vision. The strong man and the orphan try to hide, but these guys have some kind of sound amplifier. They eventually find them, but the strong man puts up a fight. In all the chaos, we see the poor orphan kid getting stuffed into the van. And then again, we see the Masonic eye symbol right on the van, which is the hole that the kid is stuffed through. The strongman chases after them, but the van gets away. He ends up in this small building by the water, where he finds a whole group of street orphans. Turns out, the kid they took is known as Little Brother. The cult's still after the strongman, and it seems they're trying to take him out. He plays dead when they come into the orphan's hideout, and these are the same orphans that we saw stealing earlier, and they got a pretty big stash. The bad guys don't notice our strongman, but they do help themselves to all the orphans' money before taking off. But the orphans aren't totally broke, they got even more cash stashed away that the Cyclops didn't find. That's what they're calling these one-eyed people in the cult. The kids grab their money and dip, and the strongman decides to follow them. Okay, now we start to get weird. We got 4 identical brothers, which definitely seem to be clones, singing "Happy Birthday" to a brain. And it's not just a person with a brain, it's a straight up brain in some steampunk contraption. This brain's name is Uncle Irvin, and he's got this whole setup where he can see and hear everything going on, kind of like Siri's creepy great-grandfather or something. So in walks the mad scientist, Crank. He's not too thrilled about this little birthday party, but Uncle Irvin's got some interesting ideas. He's theorizing that maybe the reason kids are only having nightmares is because the evil is coming from Crank himself, not the kids. Uncle Irvin suggests Crank look for the reason for his trauma in his own tears. Then the brain launches into this fairy tale that's clearly about Crank himself. It's all about this super smart inventor who could create life. He made himself a wife, but she ended up tiny thanks to some wicked genetic fairy. Then he cloned 6 kids, but they all got narcolepsy or something. Finally, he grew a brain in a fish tank. That's our boy Irvin. The issue is this genius inventor forgot to give himself the ability to dream, so he's aging fast and miserably. Crank starts crying when he hears this because, surprise, it's his own story. So basically he's very smart, but he can't dream, and that's why he's stealing kids' dreams. Next scene, we're back with the orphans. This is interesting because they're in this weird school run by conjoined twin teachers, but instead of math and reading, they're learning how to become thieves. It's kind of like another underground cult, and the teacher's called the Octopus. The strongman shows up, and the teachers decide that he can help with the heavy lifting. They take this safe down to the water, empty it out, and then ditch it. But then the strongman hears those Cyclops making announcements over a loudspeaker, and then we get some more of that one-eyed imagery. The strongman, who we now know is called One, is on the hunt for his little brother. He's chasing down that Cyclops truck and then teams up with this orphan girl named Miette, who hands him one of those Cyclops eye devices. Meanwhile, those conjoined twin teachers are throwing a fit because the orphans pulled a fast one on them. They took whatever was in the safe and didn't hand it over. We're back at the mad scientist lab, and one of the clones is yapping about some underwater concert dream he had, or he's completely making it up. Then we've got another clone bringing a kid to this brain machine. Uncle Irvin, the disembodied brain, tells him to put this kid in the sarcophagus thing. Basically a dream-sucking device. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The clone starts asking Uncle Irvin about the story that the clones have been telling each other. Turns out one of these clones is the original and the rest are just cheap knockoffs. Uncle Irvin suggests that the clone hook himself up to the kid to find out if he's the original. So they put the kid to sleep, strap the clone into this chair that has more Masonic symbols, the square and compass, which could be a reach, but once you see the same symbol over and over again, it starts to become obvious they're referencing this secret society stuff. Just as they're about to start the experiment, a fuse blows. The clone grabs this capsule with the dream in it, and Uncle Irvin tells him to throw it into the sea. Meanwhile, Miette and One are playing spy, sneaking into this weird structure where the Cyclops cult hang out. They're trying to infiltrate the place to find One's little brother. Next thing we know, we're in this underground hideout. There's a priest standing in front of a fire, giving off some sacrificial Moloch vibes. On the altar, we've got a light sun and a black sun. The priest is going on about fighting the power structure. While he's preaching, we see kids being led down a path, all tied up. Pretty messed up scene. And then in the middle of all this, we get this weird moment. Little brother, who's apparently always hungry, gets distracted by some food. Now the movie's playing this off as just a kid being a kid, but the way they shot it and timed it with all the food, and also considering other movies made by the director, it feels like there's more going on here. So we're in this underground chamber that's basically a black market for kids. These little ones, all 5 years old or younger, are being sold off to our mad scientist for his messed up experiments. The wife's greedy for even more kids, but the priest is getting nervous. He says that people are starting to ask questions. Turns out they're trading these kids for high-tech gadgets like those eyepieces and super hearing devices. They think that this tech is going to turn them into some kind of superior race. Interestingly, they're calling this eye device a third eye. Apparently it lets them see into the world of appearances. The priest is going on about temptation and perversion, while we get more of that one-eyed imagery. We're watching some cult member get his third eye installed in what seems to be an initiation ritual. Just as the priest is talking about abolishing the world of appearances, little brother lets out a burp. One and Miette hear this and swoop in to try to save him through the chute. The cult captures them, and one of the cult leaders finds some jewelry and traces it back to those conjoined twin teachers. Which is weird. Do they know each other somehow? This would imply that the twins or the octopus have some connection to the cult, and they could be raising many of these street orphans for this purpose. The twins want to know what he's going to do with One and Miette, and he's planning to take them out to the pier. Back at the lab, our mad scientist Crank is having a heart-to-heart with Uncle Irvin, questioning why are all these kids having nightmares. Irvin tells him that he is the nightmare. He tells Crank he can kidnap every kid in the world, but he'll never have a soul. Crank loses it, accusing the brain of being soulless too, but Irvin replies that he's the only real monster here. Next thing we know, they're setting up for Christmas even though it's not Christmas. Crank's trying to recreate some specific event. Meanwhile, that dream capsule is still floating around in the ocean. We then meet this new character, Marcelo, The twin sisters are asking him for a favor. They want him to save one, but they couldn't care less about Miette. Marcelo's got this bizarre setup with Russian dolls filled with this special green liquid. He takes some out and, interestingly, gives it to a trained flea. Apparently, this flea is going to be carrying around some kind of poison. I honestly think the CGI for this is surprisingly good for its time. Next, we see Crank's dressed up as this creepy Santa, singing to some terrified kids. He's trying to give them good memories for sweet dreams, but he ends up just traumatizing them. One of the clones drops an ornament on the record player, making the whole scene even more nightmarish. Then all the kids start screaming. Next scene, Juan and Miette are tied up on a plank over water, with only a basket of fish keeping them from falling. Cyclops are betting on who's gonna fall first, but then, here comes that flea from earlier, loaded up with that green poison. It lands right on top of the bald Cyclops guy's head. Marcelo shows up, playing some tune that gets the flea to release this toxic material. Suddenly, Baldy goes full on crazy. Turns out this poison isn't just poison, it's some kind of mind control juice. The guy starts taking out his own crew, and we learn something wild. These Cyclops can't see without their devices. It's not just night vision, it's their whole vision. Then it gets pretty wild. The bald guy plugs someone else's eye device into his own, forcing the poor man to watch themselves get off from the killer's perspective. This device, called Opticon, isn't just an artificial eye, it's wired straight into their brains. While all this chaos is going down, Marcelo saves one, but leaves Miette to take a dive. But just when you think Miette's gonna drown, in comes this guy in an old school diving suit rescuing her. Plot twist, it's one of the clones. But this one's got a beard and looks a bit different. This underwater clone has amnesia. He's been living down underground in this bunker, collecting all this junk that the city tosses into the water. Miette recognizes him but can't place from where. She spots the safe they stole earlier and just starts rifling through it to get back what she stole. When she tries to head back to the surface, our amnesiac clone warns her it's way too dangerous. But then, Miette opens the door and a bunch of baby toys fall out. The toys trigger something in the bearded clone. He starts remembering. Kids being taken by the devil. Children being dragged to hell. Miette decides to take a peek outside and spots a group of kids being herded onto a boat, and little brothers among them. Meanwhile, one's having a full-on pity party thinking Miette has died. Marcelo decides that the best cure for grief is, well, what seems to be a prostitute. Miette makes it back to the surface and tries to fill in the other orphans on the whole Cyclops stealing children situation, but they're more interested in one's apparent night on the town. We cut to one, who's very drunk now and seems to have forgotten about Miette, while the lady he's with accidentally says Miette in French, sending one crying. There's this weird moment where she calls him a radiator when he asks if she's cold. This is a detail that gets brought up later. Just then, Miette walks in, telling one to pull himself together. She tells him that she knows where his brother is, but one's so drunk he thinks he's seeing ghosts and passes out. Marcelo's shocked to see Miette's alive, but she doesn't bother explaining. Turns out this whole drunk one situation was a setup to hand him over to the twin teachers. But the orphan kids pull a fast one and use a crane to snatch one out of the trunk. But one ends up in the water, and Miette's giving the orphan boys grief for being mean to him, and they accuse her of being in love with one, but she insists he's not even a grown-up. It's kind of a weird moment. The orphans bail, thinking Miette's ditching them for one. We get another shot of that boat full of kids, and then there's that dream capsule that got tossed out of the lab earlier. Then the diving man spots the dream capsule that was thrown out a while ago and takes it back to his underwater hideout. Next, Juan and Miette's trying to catch some sleep, and we learn that one used to be a whale harpooner, but he was so bad at it that he got fired. Miette's curious about what it's like to have a little brother, and one calls her little sister. But then things get a little weird when he starts breathing on her to warm her up, calling himself a radiator, which goes back to that earlier scene with the grown lady in the red dress, which makes it even more strange. Meanwhile, the scuba guy is trying to get some shut-eye in his underwater hideout when something falls, making the dream capsule break open. Green smoke starts floating around and goes straight up his nose. Then it gets pretty psychedelic. The dream from the capsule becomes his dream. It turns out, this dream sequence is actually giving him his memories back. Now here's where it gets insane. We get this scene with homunculi growing in large containers. We find out that our diving man is actually the original clone. And interestingly, the whole setup looks like some kind of alchemist lab, which says a lot. Crank comes in all angry and starts choking our original clone. But the original clone chucks a flask at Crank's face, drawing blood. Then Crank's tiny wife gets in and then clocks our clone in the head before they toss him into the water. This dream is an old memory of the original clone that he must have forgotten after getting hit in the head. So it looks like Uncle Irvin, the brain in the tank, knew about this original clone all along and sent the dream capsule on purpose to jog his memory. Now here's where it gets even trippier. The green smoke escapes to the surface and starts giving a bunch of kids nightmares. Again, the CGI is surprisingly good in the way that it seamlessly integrates into the environment. The smoke makes its way to Miette while she's asleep and enters through her nose, giving her the same nightmare. She says that she saw the woman again, Crank's wife, the one who steals children, and that she also saw a minefield. She remembers what the diver told her, that there is a man with tattoos who has the map to get past the minefield. Finally, we see the kidnapped kids arriving at this oil rig castle where the lab is. They're being fed some kind of mush while Crank's enjoying a gourmet meal. Little brother pulls a sneaky one, eating Crank's fancy dinner as it's being sent up in the elevator. But there's this creepy detail in the background with a child's skeleton in the scene. Crank surprisingly isn't too mad about losing his dinner. He's more intrigued by little brother's complete lack of fear. It's like he's found his golden ticket, a kid that's not scared of him. Meanwhile, Miette and One are on the hunt for this tattooed man. Then we get some more of this weirdness where One's giving Miette a foot massage. Okay, now we're getting into some uncomfortable territory here. Miette's asking about One's future plans, and he's talking about maybe getting a wife. So the whole conversation has this strange undercurrent to it. The movie seems to be pushing for some kind of romantic angle between Miette and One, which is questionable to say the least. Miette's trying to look pretty, and One gets Miette for life tattooed on him with the heart. So it does seem that's what they're trying to do here. They finally find the tattooed man. Turns out it's this old Chinese tattoo artist with the map on his head. Back at the lab, one of the clones and Crank's wife spots something getting through the minefield on their radar. Irvin the Brain is calling this guy the Messiah who will save them all. Looks like our original clone is making his grand return, just as the Brain planned. Miette and One are prepping to go rescue little brother, but before they could head off, one of those poison-carrying fleas jumps on One's head. The twin teachers are back to finish what they started. They're after their jewels and start playing that creepy mind control tune. One goes full-on Manchurian Candidate, getting all hypnotized and violent. He slaps Miette and starts choking her while the twins keep playing their twisted melody. Miette's about to die when her tear sets off this Rube Goldberg-esque chain reaction, ending with a ship crashing into the pier. After all this goes off, One finally breaks out of his trance and falls into the water with Miette. They eventually make their escape and start navigating through the minefield. Meanwhile, Crank's playing nurse to Irvin the Brain, giving him migraine meds. He's got some high hopes for little brother being his ticket to Dreamland. Miette and One finally reach their destination, and then there's this random pelican. To me, it seems to be a Rosicrucian symbol, or it could just be a pelican. We get more of this weird romantic tension between Miette and One as she squeezes through a small hole. One ties a string around her, and she mentions that they're really starting to get attached, hinting towards their relationship again. Inside, the Brain's prepping Crank for his big dream attempt. Miette's sneaking around, nearly gets shot by Crank's wife, but she gets saved by the original clone, now known as the Professor. The Professor's basically going full Demolition Man, planting dynamite everywhere. The Professor's so focused on destroying everything that he's forgotten about the kids. Crank's wife, in a surprising moment of decency, gives Miette a key to find the children. We find a little brother hooked up to the dream machine, and Miette stumbles into this scene. The Brain drops a bombshell that he's been waiting for her all along. Turns out he was trying to send her the location through dreams. Miette can't just unplug little brother because he's under a spell. The Brain tells her the only way to save him is to enter his dream. So Miette's gearing up for some Inception level rescue mission. And would you look at that? The dream is the same creepy Santa scene from the beginning of the movie. We've come full circle with the one-eyed symbolism in that poor abused teddy bear. Miette enters the dream world and grabs the child thinking she's rescuing little brother. But surprise, she's actually holding Crank. This is probably the trippiest part. The dream landscape of the child's room morphs into the oil rig walls, blurring the lines between reality and the dream even further. We've got some heavy symbolism going on here. That child skeleton makes another appearance, and then there's this Ouroboros snake handle that we saw earlier when Crank used it to get his dinner. But it's not just some food delivery system, it's a symbol of Crank stealing the children's energy to stay young. Secret symbols hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, our original clone is still planting dynamite everywhere. Then we see that One fell on the pelican's nest, and so it does seem to be a symbol hinting at some kind of sacrifice and renewal. Crank then reveals this ring we haven't seen before, another Ouroboros with a gem. They keep emphasizing the symbol of eternal renewal. And then here's where it gets really twisted. Crank is not just about stealing dreams, it's about stealing youth. We watch Miette age rapidly while Crank gets younger. The symbolism keeps coming. We've got a library in the background, so knowledge, that creepy child skeleton again, and then Crank's ring falls off as he gets too young to wear it. It's clear now that this isn't just a fantasy film, it's diving deep into occult symbolism. Then we get this bizarre dance scene with old Miette and young Crank. Crank keeps de-aging until he's a baby, while Miette becomes ancient. There's some poetic justice here as Crank can't reach the Ouroboros handle that he's been using to steal youth. Miette, now impossibly old, pulls the handle instead. She disappears behind a red curtain. More symbolism here. While the dream version clone hooks baby Crank up to this dream machine, creating this bizarre loop sequence like he's stuck in a time loop or something. Crank finally wakes up screaming, stares blankly for a moment, and then drops dead right on Irvin's camera. Miette's still stuck in dreamland, but now One's there trying to wake her up. She finally wakes up too, saying that she's had this really weird dream. Meanwhile, the original clone is trying to blow himself up with the oil rig. One and Miette grab all the kids and make a run for it. The bomb goes off and everyone's scrambling to escape. Even Irvin the Brain is making a break for it. The original clone seems to have gone insane and doesn't want to leave. But then, a piece of paper with an equation flutters into his hand, and suddenly he has a change of heart and decides that he wants to live after all. This paper must have given him a memory, and we find out that this original clone is actually the creator of all of the clones and even Irvin the Brain. He's the professor. The whole place goes up in flames as everyone else makes their escape. Then the movie randomly ends with little brother burping. This film really is a fever dream, but on the first watch a lot of these details might be missed because it is a long movie and it's better if you watch the original French version. But the movie really does have a lot of esoteric symbols and references made, which makes it very interesting. Is the director trying to say something? Interestingly, the director Jean-Pierre Jeunet has other bizarre films, one called Delicatessen, which came out before The City of Lost Children and has some of the same actors. It's literally a film about eating humans, and we get some of that pig symbolism. He's most well known for his movie Amélie, which is the most successful French film, but he has more movies with interesting symbolism. Micmacs also makes a reference to the Masons, as the arms manufacturer logo is the square and compass. Oh, and the character 1 is played by Ron Perlman, who's in some other movies with esoteric themes such as Hellboy 1 and 2, where he plays a summoned demon through a portal and he's an agent in a secret government agency. Hellboy 2 also has some more symbols with underground cities. I guess I'll leave it at that. The City of Lost Children is a very unique film, filled with a bunch of occult symbols, and I just thought it would be cool to cover it. You have children being taken for esoteric secret projects, homunculi, clones, cult societies, orphans, mind control, and stealing youth. If there are any other strange films that you want us to cover and break down, please let us know in the comments. We got some more stuff coming out soon. Thanks for watching, and all we can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?